We're talking to Minna Olander, research fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. And my name is Harri Tiido. To set the stage, we are talking in the middle of May 2023. And my first question would be, in fact, about the Finnish attitude towards NATO, now that Finland is member of NATO. Has the attitude somewhat changed because the goal has been achieved? And outside Finland, maybe also there is now even less interest concerning Finland. I remember a couple of days ago, Mika Aaltola said, he was in Washington, that the interest towards Finland has been reduced after the membership actualized.
So within Finland, the NATO membership is viewed very positively. The Finns were getting already quite impatient about the process when it was really stalling in the beginning of the year, and it looked very uncertain, like at what point we will actually get the full membership with the problems with Turkey and especially with Turkey's problems with Sweden. So I think that it was a very nice moment for Finland. Like when it happened, many people watched the ceremonies live when they happened, and there was a lot of commenting on Finnish social media, for example, about how people slept so well the night after NATO accession and felt so safe and so on. So I think that the support has not been reduced at all so far. It's very high at around 85%. So it has been a very remarkable process considering that in January 2022 it was still like below 30%, I think. So this has been the support is very substantial, both in the society and also politically. So there's very strong agreement between opposition and what is soon to be the government that is now being formed on this subject. So in the elections, it was quite interesting that neither Ukraine or the Finnish support for Ukraine nor NATO were really election topics, because there's such a robust agreement on both, like on the support for Ukraine and support for NATO membership. And then of course it's bound to happen that Finland is a little bit less in the focus of international attention now that this process has been concluded, which is of course also a good thing, because they're part of why Finland got so much unusual international attention was that there were also concerns about the process. How will Russia react? What will happen? How fast can this be done? And so on. And about people were kind of what is this Finland and where is it? So of course it is also in a way a positive sign that now this process has been concluded, everything went well, and things can calm down a bit. So I don't see it as a negative development.
Could it be that in fact the Finns now are saying what they were thinking throughout the decades after the Second World War? Because I remember reserve officers telling me in the 90s that in fact Finnish army was getting ready for one thing only. It means next war against Soviet Union or later Russia. And it was not spoken about on official level, but people were thinking it, and they were afraid of saying it aloud. And now you can say it aloud. Yes, it has been this way, and now we can claim it.
Yes, it's absolutely true. So Finland had this kind of from an outside perspective, sometimes even from an inside perspective, a somewhat maybe confusing kind of, I would call it maybe a dual track approach to how to handle the relations with Russia. So on the one hand, as you mentioned, Finland has consistently been preparing for the next war with Russia since the last war, which was when the continuation war ended with the Lapland War in the 40s. So for the past 80 years, Finland has been preparing for the next war with Russia. So this has been a constant in Finnish security and defense policy. There has been always this very clear threat perception and analysis that the one threat that is likely from a Finnish perspective is coming from the east. And but then the other side, the other track of this approach was that there were this very strict kind of limits of what you can say openly. I think one of the best examples was in 2007 when our then defense minister Jyri Häkämies was in Washington DC, and he said this famous in a speech famously that given Finland's geopolitical location, there are three main security challenges, and these are Russia, Russia, and Russia. And it was a scandal in Finland, not because anyone would have disagreed with him. That was not the problem, but it was just not considered politically correct to say it out loud. So it has certainly been like there has been this big discrepancy between like what has been said rhetorically and then what has been practically done all the time. It's very interesting if you look at Finnish foreign security and defense reports. Even in the kind of this optimistic moment in the early 2000s, even then the possibility of an armed aggression against Finland, again not naming the aggressor of course, but everyone knew that Russia was meant, it was never excluded, not even then. So Finland has literally been constantly like preparing for a potential land war, which would have been like a Russian attack. Now what happened last year was that this kind of discrepancy between the rhetorics and the practicalities ended, and there has been this kind of alignment of what is being said and what is being done, and that was definitely in a way a moment that probably felt very liberating to a lot of Finns. There was you could sense it in the public debate that people had a like need to vent in a way and kind of air their grievances and their thoughts also about the war, Russia's war in Ukraine right now. I think Finns were first, when Russia invaded Ukraine last year, I think first very disappointed, like why can't Russia be just a normal peaceful neighbor? So the first emotion was maybe like this kind of deep disappointment, like why did this have to happen again? Like we were kind of half expecting this to happen sooner or later in light of like statistics, but why does it have to be this way? And then Finns got like increasingly angry seeing like how brutal Russia is in this war against Ukraine.
Let's come to a bigger picture. When Finland joined, most likely Sweden sooner or later will be a member of NATO as well. And then we'll have a kind of line of countries from the Arctic down south. It means Nordic countries, then Baltics, then Poland, Ukraine in the future most likely, but let's say Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. It means basically on the eastern flank of NATO, we're going to have a kind of line of countries. Currently we have a cooperation agreement between Finland, Sweden and Norway for the cooperation in the Arctic, which is very useful. Would it be useful maybe to have a kind of closer cooperation between these countries forming this borderline or front line for NATO, although I know that in NATO they don't like kind of inside NATO formations, but maybe it would be useful to coordinate the activities and also NATO policies towards the east along this line.
I'm sure that this will to an extent also happen because it's a very natural development. Things are changing so much right now. NATO is in a way returning back to its roots, to territorial defense in Europe, which was for a long time after the Cold War kind of not on the agenda, and it was more about out-of-area operations of the type of Afghanistan, Mali, and so on. So this is probably, I think that within NATO there needs to be kind of courage to start like thinking differently, thinking outside the box, that maybe, for example, the current enhanced forward presence systems that are in place, maybe they were a good transition after 2014, but now we may have to rethink the situation, like with this kind of bigger picture that you just painted. Because Finland and Sweden joining NATO changes the situation quite fundamentally. It changes the strategic situation in the Baltic Sea region very, very much. It tilts the correlation of forces in NATO's favor and really dramatically reduces Russia's room for maneuver. So Russia will have much higher costs and stakes in continuing this kind of intimidation tactics that it's been using against the smaller neighbors in this region previously. So and then like you already see this kind of like, for example, in Finland now that we are a very fresh NATO member, Finland is starting to kind of develop the NATO policy, like what should be like with limited resources, of course, in a small country, or like the country is not small, but the population is. And of course, Estonians know this very well. Like you have to be smart about like what you invest your human resources in. So there's been this process of identifying relevant partners and how do we start shaping our NATO policy and our role, like how do we understand our role in NATO? So there's, for example, great interest in the developments in Poland. Where is all this like incredible defense spending in Poland going? What is going to be Poland's role? How do we fit together? Like how can we work together? And what is this kind of line that we're creating here? And then of course, yes. So I think what you already see in terms of support for Ukraine is that it's precisely these countries that have been very firm in their support. The Nordics as a group are, I think, by now like one of the like counted together, the support from the Nordics has surpassed, I think, even Germany. Although now Germany announced this huge package, which is great. So maybe Germany is now again like ahead of us. But I think that it has been like very, very clear that there was this firm and swift reaction to Russia's invasion of Ukraine last year, this full-scale invasion, or the second invasion, what you want to call it. So there is already this kind of, it is maybe taking shape, this kind of group of like, in this way, like-minded countries, that there is this very clear shared threat perception and also similar ideas what to do about it. And of course, like, I think it's very nice that you also brought the Black Sea and the like southeastern flank also into the picture, because like the Arctic will be one thing. And it will be kind of like, to an extent, a new dimension for NATO that needs to be accounted for now, to an extent that has not been the case until now. But then the Black Sea is also like, we can't just like be kind of navel gazing into our own region in the Baltic Sea. We have to also understand how it links to the Black Sea and what are the developments in the Black Sea, how do they affect us here. So I think that like some kind of tighter coordination in this group would be very beneficial for NATO as a whole. So that's why maybe we shouldn't be so afraid of kind of different formations within NATO.
And last but not least, what about Åland or Ahvenanmaa? I have to say immediately that your name is Ålander, which does not mean in your case that you are from Åland. But if we take into consideration the Russian habit of prying around where there are cables, pipelines, and etc. Åland is in a place where there are also different cables going from the side of Finland towards west to Sweden. So Åland is currently demilitarized, and I understand that Finland has said you are not intending at least to change this status. Is it possible to have inside NATO, between two NATO countries, it means Finland and Sweden in the future, a demilitarized zone all of a sudden?
It wouldn't be the first one. Svalbard is of course also like this part of Norway.
But it's up north, it's away.
Yes, but it's, I think, no less crucial precisely because of the Russian presence there. So I think that might be even a more urgent issue to address. So I think that we had quite a heated debate about the Åland Islands in Finland lately in the last weeks after the NATO accession, and I thought it was interesting that the debate got so heated after the accession and not before, because Åland is obviously now also like the situation has changed fundamentally. Åland is now also NATO territory, like the rest of Finland. So I would say that this was a bigger issue and a bigger problem like 1.5 months ago when Finland wasn't yet a NATO member. The thing with the demilitarization is that because it is ingrained in several international treaties that go back a long time, it's quite the Pandora's box to open that and start changing it. So I think that there are ways of handling this without necessarily changing the status of Åland. Of course, this is a thing that should be discussed, and especially if the people in Åland, the actual Ålanders, which I am not one of, like start thinking differently, then of course this should be discussed. But also regarding the very important subsea infrastructure or the like underwater infrastructure, where there have been reports lately about Russia's kind of potential to sabotage, and like of course after the Nord Stream sabotage, this has become an even more like likely scenario and an urgent issue. And that is definitely something that should be enhanced between Finland and Sweden, for example. Finland and Sweden have very good conditions to do this because the bilateral defense cooperation is already on a very high level. So these are issues that should definitely be addressed, but I don't think that this particular issue necessarily would require changing the status of Åland.
But there is a Russian consulate on Åland, and in fact, maybe it would be useful to get rid of this consulate as a first step, because if I remember correctly, during Cold War, Russians had a separate department in this consulate, which was manned by officers that were supposed to take over the leadership of Soviet troops when they land on Åland. And even now, if I'm not mistaken, according to the treaty or agreement, they have the right to keep intelligence officers in that so-called quote-unquote consulate. So maybe Finland should start by getting rid of this consulate, because it could be used as a pretext for Russia.
So the consulate is at this moment, as far as I know, they don't have a very large staff there, but theoretically it could be addressed. So this is not quite as deeply linked to the overall status of Åland. So the consulate, the status of the consulate is based on a different treaty that is a bit younger, from the 40s. And thus maybe this is definitely like a somewhat smaller issue, maybe in the bigger picture of Åland, that potentially could indeed be tackled in an easier way than the whole demilitarization status. So obviously Finland needs to keep a very close eye on this consulate and assess it regularly, whether it poses a threat or not. Yeah.
Thank you. And I remind, it was Minna Olander from Finnish Institute of International Affairs.
Thank you very much.